All right, everybody, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Okay, excellent. Today we're going to try to crack the code of Andrew Schulz's comedic mind. You know, the guy who's not afraid to push a few buttons, make you think twice.
Right.
So we're basing this whole deep dive on a recent interview that he did on Club Shay Shay.
Okay.
And it is packed with insights about his comedic style and his, I guess, his stance on cancel culture and how some of his life experiences have kind of fueled his approach to humor.
I think what's really interesting is how he's navigating the comedy landscape today, with everybody, There's just so much sensitivity around what you can and can't joke about.
Yeah.
He's got that no-holds-barred approach, but he has a really unique perspective on cancel culture and whether it even really exists anymore.
Right. He even jumps right into it, almost dismissing the idea of cancel culture as we understand it.
Yeah.
He even recounts a time when he was almost canceled himself due to an accidental leak on Instagram Live. I was surprised that he didn't go into specifics about it, but it was clear how much the experience really affected him emotionally.
Right.
And he really emphasizes the toll it took on his family, having to explain something so personal and taken out of context.
It raises a really crucial question for the rest of us. Like, what does cancel culture even mean in today's world?
Yeah.
Is it still this, all-powerful force that can ruin careers overnight? Or is it something else, less defined?
I think that's a question we all grapple with, not just people in public eye, right?
Yeah.
We hear about people being canceled all the time, but the consequences are often really unclear.
Right.
And Schultz's perspective, as someone who's been in the hot seat, as he says, adds a whole new layer to the conversation. It makes you wonder, is it about accountability? Is it about censorship? Or is it something else entirely?
Yeah. And it's not even just about the public consequences, right?
Yeah.
Like, he talks about how important privacy is to him. And obviously, in this instance, that was violated. For somebody like him who values his privacy, to have it exposed so publicly must have been incredibly jarring.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Okay, well, let's shift gears a bit and talk about Schultz's signature comedic style.
Yeah.
That no-holds-barred kind of approach.
Right.
He is so willing to joke about pretty much anything.
Yeah.
Even potentially sensitive topics.
Yeah.
One example he brings up is a joke about the black girlfriend effect.
Okay.
Now, without repeating the joke itself, even that phrase can spark debate.
Right.
Is it simply reflecting a cultural observation, or is it wading into dangerous stereotypes?
And that's what makes him, so fascinating, right? Like, he's walking this tightrope between pushing the boundaries and genuinely trying to connect with people from all different backgrounds. He insists that he's not going after any group specifically.
Right.
But rather focusing on these shared experiences and, nuanced observations that make people feel seen, not ridiculed.
Right. And he has this interesting observation about how audiences react to his jokes, too.
Okay.
He noticed that. White audience members will often look around almost as if checking for approval from minorities in the crowd before they laugh.
Interesting.
But minority audience members, he says, tend to laugh more freely.
Wow. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's really insightful, right? He suggests that there's this extra layer of social anxiety at play for some audience members.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's tied to a fear of appearing insensitive
or
politically incorrect. But for others, there might be a sense of relief or recognition in seeing their experiences reflected in humor.
It highlights how humor can be a double-edged sword.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Really.
Because one person finds hilarious, another might find offensive. And, the context, the audience, the delivery, it all plays a role.
It all matters, yeah. It makes you wonder, can comedy ever truly be universal? Or is it always going to be filtered through our individual experiences? And sensitivities?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Now, he also talks about how his upbringing in New York City, kind of this melting pot of cultures, really played a huge role in shaping his perspective on humor. He was exposed to so many different backgrounds and ways of life from a really young age.
Yeah.
And it almost desensitized him to what others might consider offensive, simply because his lived experience was so diverse.
I'm really intrigued by that.
Yeah.
It's like his comfort zone was expanded.
Yeah.
By being surrounded by so much diversity.
Yeah.
It makes me think about the role of exposure and how it shapes our perceptions. of what's acceptable.
Absolutely.
Or taboo in humor.
And it wasn't all like, sunshine and roses.
Right.
He tells a story about getting punched on stage early in his career.
Right.
Because a joke didn't land well, So it's a reminder that comedy, just like any art form, I guess, it has real-world consequences.
Oh, yeah. I bet that hurt, too.
I know.
But he laughs about it now. I mean, what's interesting is he laughs about it now.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to his resilience and his willingness to learn from his mistakes.
Yeah.
Even the painful ones. It's clear he's come a long way since then.
Yeah.
But it makes me curious. Like, what was the turning point for him? When did he really start to hone his craft and find that comedic voice?
That's what we're going to uncover as we kind of delve deeper into his journey.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to note that this early experience with failure didn't deter him at all.
Right.
In fact, it fueled his hustle and his determination to make it in the world of comedy.
Right. Speaking of hustle, he talks about how growing up in that kind of make it happen environment in New York really instilled a strong work ethic in him.
Right.
He even mentions selling fake DVDs and CDs as a kid.
Wow.
There's that entrepreneurial spirit,
Yeah. Shining through.
Early on. It's amazing to see how these early experiences, the diversity, the hustle, the setbacks.
Yeah.
It all contributed to shaping the comedian that we see today.
Right. It's like a recipe, right? You've got all these ingredients.
Yeah.
And then they all come together.
They come together.
To create this, this unique flavor. That is Andrew Schulz. And speaking of making it, he has definitely achieved a level of success that most comedians only dream of.
Oh, absolutely. Sold out shows at Madison Square Garden, a Netflix special. He's like, playing in the big leagues now.
Right.
But with that success comes a whole new set of challenges and observations. He talks about how people react to extreme success.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people will attribute it to luck or external factors or even conspiracies.
It's so true. It's like people have a hard time accepting that someone can achieve that level of success through just hard work and talent. Like they need to find another explanation,
Almost to protect their own egos, I think.
It's a fascinating psychological phenomenon, isn't it? It makes you wonder. What's going on beneath the surface when we react negatively to somebody else's success?
Yeah.
Are we envious? Are we insecure? Or is it something else entirely?
Yeah, I think it's a question we all need to ask ourselves from time to time. It's a good reminder to check our own motivations and reactions, especially when it comes to celebrating the accomplishments of others.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, almost like we have to create this narrative to justify why we haven't achieved the same thing.
Right.
But Schulz doesn't come off as bitter about it at all.
Yeah.
He actually views it as a cost of doing business.
Yeah.
You know, in other words, if you're going to reach the top, you have to accept that some people are going to resent you for it.
I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
But it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's almost like a tax you pay for being successful.
Right.
Not a pleasant thought, but it's probably a reality for anyone in the public eye.
Right. And it takes a certain level of maturity and self-awareness to not let that negativity get to you. And Schulz seems to have developed a thick skin over the years, which is probably essential for surviving in the cutthroat world of comedy.
Okay, now I'm curious about someone that Schulz clearly admires, which is Joe Rogan.
Right.
He really credits Rogan with elevating comedy's status and praises him for genuinely wanting to support other comedians, which, as he points out, isn't always the case in such a competitive industry like this.
That's what makes Rogan so unique, right? He's reached a pinnacle of success, yet he seems to genuinely want to help other people rise too.
Right.
And he tells this great anecdote about Rogan praising him to Dave Chapelle.
Yeah.
And instead of joining in the praise, Chapelle kind of downplayed Schulz's talent.
Oh, wow. Hold on.
Yeah.
Did he take that personally?
He didn't seem to, interestingly enough.
Okay.
He actually framed it as Chapelle's way of staying grounded.
Okay.
Almost like a defense mechanism to avoid getting caught up in the hype.
Interesting.
It makes you think about the dynamics between these comedic giants.
Yeah.
Even at the top of their game, there's this underlying tension.
Yeah.
And maybe even a bit of insecurity.
That's such a humanizing realization.
It is.
Right. Because we tend to put celebrities on a pedestal.
Right.
But they're just as complex and flawed as the rest of us.
Right.
And their world, especially in comedy, just seems even more pressure-filled than we realize.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's like they're constantly being judged and compared and challenged.
And you can't forget the business side of it either.
Right.
Schulz really admires Rogan's decision to buy back his special from a network and release it independently on YouTube.
Right.
He sees that as like a major power move, a way to reclaim ownership and control over his art.
Oh, that reminds me. Schulz did something similar too, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
He bought back one of his specials and released it independently.
Yeah, and he talks about how that decision allowed him to, like, preserve his creative vision without having to compromise for network demands, you know?
Yeah.
Plus, he mentions the, like, impressive view count and the financial success he achieved.
Right.
It seems like he's really walking the walk when it comes to this whole idea of ownership and creative freedom.
It's a powerful statement, especially in an industry where artists are so often pressured to conform to certain expectations.
Right.
It makes you wonder if this is, like, the future of entertainment, you know?
Yeah.
Are we moving toward a model where artists have more control over their work and a more direct connection with their audience?
It's definitely a trend we're seeing more and more of, and it's very empowering for both the creators and the consumers, I think.
Yeah.
It cuts out the middleman.
Yeah.
And allows for, like, a more authentic, unfiltered experience.
Yeah.
And it seems like Schulz is a firm believer in this whole philosophy of ownership. He sees it as, like, a path to true freedom and creative expression.
It takes guts to go against the grain like that, especially when there's so much at stake. But for Schulz, it's not just about the money or the fame.
Right.
You know, it's about staying true to his vision and doing things his own way. Now, on a more personal note, he briefly touches on his family life, mentioning his wife and their struggles with conceiving.
Right.
It's a pretty vulnerable topic to bring up.
Yeah.
Especially for a comedian who's, you know, known for his often brash persona.
What struck me was his honesty.
Yeah.
And the way he connected it back to his comedy, you know?
Yeah.
He talks about going through IVF.
Right.
And how the experience inspired his latest special.
Right.
It's a reminder that even someone like Schulz, who seems to thrive on pushing boundaries and making light of difficult topics,
Right.
is still deeply affected by real-life challenges.
Yeah, there's a real humanity to that.
Right.
It's like we're getting this glimpse behind the curtain, seeing the person behind the persona.
Yeah.
And it's a good reminder that everyone, regardless of their public image, is dealing with their own struggles and finding their own ways to cope.
Absolutely. And it also makes you think about how the conversation surrounding infertility and alternative family-building methods has evolved over the years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a topic that was once taboo, shrouded in shame and secrecy.
Right.
But people like Schulz were helping to normalize those conversations,
Right.
using humor to break down stigmas and connect with others who might be going through similar experiences.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that humor can be so incredibly powerful, not just for making us laugh,
Right.
but for helping us process difficult emotions, connect with others, and even challenge societal norms.
It's like Schulz is saying, hey, life is messy and complicated,
Yeah.
but we can find humor in it even in the darkest of times.
Yeah.
And that's a really powerful message.
Okay, so now I want to shift gears a little bit and circle back to Schulz's upbringing in New York City. He talks about how being exposed to such a diverse mix of cultures from such a young age really shaped his perspective on humor and his comfort with tackling, like, a wide range of topics.
Absolutely. It's like that diverse environment was his comedic training ground.
Right.
Almost like a real-life improv class where he learned to read the room, adapt to different audiences, and find humor in unexpected places.
Right, exactly.
He specifically highlights this hustle mentality that was so prevalent in his social circles, emphasizing that everybody, regardless of their background, was striving to make it.
Right.
It was this shared ambition, this drive to succeed that bound them together.
And it's so interesting how he ties that back to his views on immigration.
Yeah.
You know, he's such a strong advocate for immigrants.
Yeah.
And he attributes that perspective to his personal experience as the son of an immigrant.
Right.
He saw firsthand the hard work and determination it took for his family to build a life in America.
And that personal connection adds so much weight to his argument. It's like he's not just speaking from a theoretical standpoint, he's speaking from lived experience.
Exactly.
And it challenges us to look beyond the political rhetoric surrounding immigration and consider the human stories, the dreams, the sacrifices, the contributions of those who come to this country seeking a better life.
I'm also struck by his observation that immigrants often embody the very values that are considered, you know, like core to the American dream. Hard work, resilience, a belief in the possibility of upward mobility.
He actually contrasts this with what he perceives as like a lack of hope among some native-born Americans, suggesting that maybe there's something we can learn from the immigrant experience.
Right.
It's a provocative statement that makes you question our assumptions about national identity, privilege, and the pursuit of the American dream.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most valuable perspectives come from those who've had to fight the hardest for their place in society.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, what would happen if we shifted our focus from fear and exclusion to embracing the diversity and the drive that immigrants bring to our country?
It's a thought-provoking question that challenges us to rethink our narratives about immigration and its impact on American society.
Definitely.
Now, I also want to touch on something that really caught my attention.
Yeah.
Schulz's interview with Donald Trump.
Wait, he interviewed Donald Trump?
He did.
I had no idea.
Yeah, he mentions it in the context of discussing, like, venue cancellations.
Okay.
And how some venues might have been hesitant to book him because of his willingness to engage with, controversial figures like Trump.
Okay, what was that like?
He doesn't go into great detail about the interview itself.
Right.
But he does emphasize that he's not afraid to have difficult conversations or engage with people who hold different viewpoints.
Right.
He sees it as an opportunity to understand different perspectives, even if he doesn't agree with them.
That's actually pretty refreshing to hear, especially in today's climate where it seems like everyone is retreating into their own echo chambers.
Right.
It takes a certain level of confidence and intellectual curiosity to be willing to step outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And engage with people that you might fundamentally disagree with.
And he's not just doing it for the sake of being provocative either.
Right.
He specifically mentions 3 key issues that he wanted to discuss with Trump: protecting IVF, ending foreign wars, and showing compassion for law-abiding illegal immigrants.
That's a surprisingly diverse range of topics.
Right. It shows that he's not just interested in, scoring political points.
Right.
He's actually trying to use his platform to advocate for causes he believes in, even if it means engaging with someone as polarizing as Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's interesting how he connects his personal experiences.
Yeah.
His comedic approach and his political views all into this cohesive worldview.
Right.
He's clearly not afraid to be controversial, but he's also thoughtful, engaged, and genuinely trying to make sense of the world around him.
And he's willing to take risks, both in his comedy and in his business ventures. Yeah. Remember his decision to buy back his special and release it independently.
Right.
That was a bold move, and it speaks to his belief in ownership and his entrepreneurial spirit.
It's like he's constantly pushing boundaries.
Yeah.
Challenging the status quo and finding new ways to connect with his audience.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that success often requires taking risks and having faith in your own vision.
And it's not just about external success either.
Right.
He's also willing to be vulnerable, sharing his personal struggles with infertility and how that experience shaped his perspective on life and family.
It's a reminder that even those who seem to have it all, face real-life challenges and find meaning in unexpected places.
Exactly. It's that blend of humor, hustle, and heart that makes Schulz such a compelling figure.
Yeah, he's a comedian who's not afraid to push boundaries, but he's also deeply connected to his personal experiences and committed to using his platform to spark conversations about important issues.
He's a reminder that sometimes the greatest rewards come from taking risks and betting on yourself.
Definitely.
And he doesn't shy away from sharing his vulnerabilities, demonstrating that even those who seem to have it all face real-life challenges and find meaning in unexpected ways.
I think it's his authenticity that resonates with people.
Yeah.
He's not putting on an act. He's being himself, flaws and all. And that makes him relatable, even when he's saying things that might make us uncomfortable.
And that's the beauty of comedy, isn't it?
Yeah.
It has the power to make us laugh, think, and even question our own beliefs.
He's definitely a comedian who's constantly evolving.
Yes.
Both personally and professionally.
Absolutely.
And it's so fascinating to see how his experiences, both on and off stage, continue to shape his unique perspective on the world.
It's clear that he's not just a funny guy.
Right.
He's a sharp observer of human nature, a skilled storyteller, and someone who's not afraid to challenge conventional wisdom.
He's a reminder that sometimes the most thought-provoking insights come from the most unexpected sources.
Yeah.
And that laughter, even when it's uncomfortable, can be a powerful tool for connection and understanding.
Yeah, it's almost like he's using comedy as a tool for social commentary.
Right.
A way to spark these conversations.
Yeah.
about these really important issues, but still make us laugh, you know?
Yeah.
It's a delicate balance to strike.
Absolutely, and it's what sets him apart from so many other comedians.
Right.
You know, he's not just going for the easy laughs.
Right.
He's trying to challenge our perspectives and make us think more critically about the world around us. It's almost like he's saying, hey, let's have some fun, but let's also use this opportunity to engage in some meaningful dialogue.
I really appreciate that about him.
Yeah.
He doesn't shy away from the tough stuff, but he does it with a sense of humor and a willingness to acknowledge the complexities of those issues.
He never comes across as preachy or condescending.
Right.
It's more like he's inviting us into a conversation.
Sharing his perspective and encouraging us to form our own opinions.
So after this deep dive into Andrew Schulz's world, what are some of the key takeaways for you? What stands out as like the most surprising or insightful aspects of his comedic mind?
I think for me, it's his ability to balance these seemingly contradictory elements. He's brash, outspoken, yet also thoughtful and introspective.
Right.
He's a successful comedian who's achieved mainstream recognition, yet he's fiercely independent and unafraid to challenge the status quo.
Right.
He's willing to push boundaries and make us uncomfortable, yet he also reveals a genuine vulnerability and empathy that makes him so relatable.
I totally agree. He's this complex mix of contradictions that somehow works.
Yeah.
It's like he's constantly challenging our expectations of what a comedian should be. And that's what makes him so fascinating.
And I think his story offers some valuable lessons for all of us, regardless of whether we're aspiring comedians or just trying to navigate life's complexities.
Oh, absolutely. What kind of lessons are we talking about?
Well, for one, he reminds us that success isn't a straight line.
Right.
It's messy, it's unpredictable, and it often involves setbacks and failures along the way. But what really matters is how you respond to those challenges. Schulz's willingness to learn from his mistakes, to keep hustling, and to never give up on his vision, it's truly inspiring.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, it's not about how many times you fall down, it's about how many times you get back up.
Exactly.
And Schulz seems to embody that spirit.
Absolutely. He also reminds us of the importance of authenticity. You know, in a world where everyone's trying to project this perfect image, Schulz is refreshingly real.
Right.
He's not afraid to show his flaws, his vulnerabilities, his struggles, and that's what makes him so relatable. It's like he's saying, hey, I'm just a regular guy trying to figure things out, just like you.
And that vulnerability, I think, is what allows him to connect with his audience on such a deep level.
Yeah.
It's like he's giving us permission to be ourselves, to embrace our imperfections, and to find the humor in the chaos of life.
Exactly. And finally, I think Schulz challenges us to be more open-minded.
Right.
To engage with people who have different perspectives, and to try to find common ground even when we disagree.
That's such an important message, especially in today's world, which is so polarized.
Yeah.
You know, it's so easy to get caught up in our own echo chambers.
Yeah.
And just demonize those who hold different views. But Schulz reminds us that real dialogue, real understanding can only happen when we're willing to listen to each other, even when it's uncomfortable.
It's like he's saying, hey, let's have some tough conversations, but let's do it with respect, with curiosity, and with a sense of humor. And that's a recipe for not only better comedy, but a better world.
Well said. So to wrap things up, if you could have a conversation with Andrew Schulz, what would you ask him? What insights would you be most curious to explore further?
Ooh, that's a great question to leave our listeners with. I think I'd be curious to hear more about his creative process. Like, how does he come up with his jokes? How does he decide which topics to tackle? And how does he navigate that line between pushing boundaries and being respectful?
Those are great questions. I'd love to pick his brain about his entrepreneurial journey as well. He seems to have a really savvy approach to business, especially in terms of leveraging these new platforms and building his brand independently.
Definitely. And on a more personal level, I'd be interested to hear more about his experiences with fatherhood and how that's impacted his comedy and his outlook on life.
Oh, me too. It seems like that's a chapter of his life that's just beginning to unfold. And I'm sure it'll bring a whole new dimension to his work. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the comedic mind of Andrew Schulz. Hopefully you've gained some new insights into his style, his perspectives, and the forces that have shaped his unique comedic voice.
It's been a fascinating journey, and I hope it sparks some thought-provoking conversations for our listeners.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep laughing.